again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Comprehensive D&D 5e Guides, the show that I really need to come up with a better name for, but the wand of inspiration has not yet struck me yet. I said yet twice. If you have any other catchier names for this segment, feel free to leave them in the comments below. But I told you guys that I would have I would finish the Dragon Knight class, my custom class for 5th edition, and so that's what I'm gonna do. Like I mentioned, like I mentioned before, the basics of how to interpret a class and really figure out what the class is designed to do is based on this idea from Wizards of the Coast. I have a buddy who playtests for them, and this is the advice that he's gotten from Wizards of the Coast when they talk about when they're creating new character options and things like that. Is for a class, it should the defining features of the class, the things that make it unique, should happen within the first 2 levels. So we've talked about that. We've talked about how the Dragon Knight is basically defined by 3 things. They are the weapon that they use, which is what the Draconic Callings are designed to really focus on. So that aspect of the Dragon Knight is really, really expanded upon in the different callings. The second is the transformation. That is largely expanded upon in the main class itself. And then the third is the dragon attacks, which the majority of dragon attacks you get from your calling. But there is one dragon attack, the Dragon Breath at level 20, that you get from the just base class. So those are the 3 things. So again, in this, we're definitely going to talk about the weapon itself, because again, dragon weapons are very, very unique, can only be wielded by Dragon Knights, and can only be wielded by certain kinds of Dragon Knights. So they're very personal weapons, and then they really identify and define how that calling is meant to be played. And then obviously the dragon attacks will help to reinforce what the calling is designed to do. So understanding that stuff will really help you to be able to play it to its fullest potential. So the warlord, came from just history of the calling itself and why it wasn't included in the first one. First of all, I like 3s, and so does D&D. Most classes have 3 subclasses. The exceptions to that are Rangers, which are the Player's Handbook Rangers are not great. I actually prefer the Unearthed Arcana version of the Ranger and would love them to publish that sometime so it can become an official rule. If some people like the original Ranger, that's great. I think balance-wise, compared to the other classes, the Ranger is by far the weakest, and the the one with the annual animal companion is really really bad as far as balance is concerned, and they fixed that in the updated Ranger one. Anyway, so that's the exception. Wizards are the exception to that rule because they actually get 8 different callings, and then sorcerers and clerics. Those are the only ones that in the core book don't have 3 callings or 3 subclasses. And wizard and cleric each have a lot more than 3. The only ones that actually have less than 3 are ranger and sorcerer. So that's one of the reasons I made 3. The warlord was actually inspired by 2 different things. One, I had a player that was multi-classing rogue and Dragon Knight in one of my campaigns, and for a dexterity-based Dragon Knight, you really only have the Dragoon, and when the character first multi-classed, they were kind of just expecting to go Dragoon. And I went, you know what? Let me try something different. I created this alternate class and showed it to them, and they went, yeah, I want to do that. I would much rather do that than the Dragoon thing. So that was one of the things is I wanted another dexterity, much more, kind of different feel. Again, the Dragoon is that hyper-mobile, ranged attacker, and I didn't really have like a closer, melee style dexterity based class. So that was part of it. The other thing actually harkens back to 4th edition. If you look in my bookcase, you'll notice one of the books just looks out of place there. It's got a white spine on it. That's a 4th edition. I believe that's Player's Handbook 2 or 1. I can't remember. I've got both of them. I'm a huge fan of 4th edition. I really enjoyed it. I actually use aspects of 4th edition in my 5th edition games because there was a lot of good stuff in there. There was a lot of stuff in there that was, it worked, but it was not as conducive to the kind of games that I like to run. So there, good things or bad things, but 4th edition is not the evil thing that a lot of people make it out to be. It was a fantastic system, and it had the exact effect that D&D that Wizards of the Coast was looking for, which is it targeted a brand new market. 3rd edition had decimated their new player base because of how complex it was, how difficult it was to get in, and how easy it was to make a broken character. Not broken to the, as in OP. I mean broken as in a useless character. If you put your skills in the wrong places, yeah, it wasn't going to work very well. If you didn't choose your race and class correctly, if you chose the wrong feats when you leveled up, if you didn't have a plan for your character really from level 1, you would, by about like 7th or 8th level, you would be outclassed by people who had simply just planned their class well. And so 4th edition was an answer to that, where it actually had a built-in component where if you took an ability that just really didn't fit your character very well, you could replace one ability every level up. So it was designed to be easier for people to try new things and try things that shouldn't technically work just to see if they could do something, and they wouldn't be penalized for it later on. It had the unfortunate side effect that WotC didn't anticipate of alienating the current player base because they had spent years learning this massively complex system only for all of that information to be thrown out the window and then basically forced to learn a brand new system that had very little in common with the old one. So it was, you know, a little bit of give and take. But the reason I bring up fourth edition is fourth edition had this thing that I actually liked because it really kind of defined how you were supposed to play your character. It was a little bit easier for people to understand how they were supposed to play their character and what their role was going to be without you know, pigeonholing people. And that was it. There's 4 kinds of classes. I can't remember what they were called, but you had I believe it was defenders, which were your tanks. They were designed to, you know, take a lot of hits. They generally would have high armor class, high defenses in general. They would have a lot of abilities that would make it so that enemies would focus on them and stuff like that. You had your strikers, which were damage dealers. They just did a lot of damage. You had your leaders, which were the healers. And that was one of the other things I liked is there were really unique ways to do healing in 4th edition that don't exist in 5th edition as of yet. Like, one of my favorite healers was the Warlord, and it was a strength-based healer. All of their abilities were based off their strength score, and yet they could still heal and do everything like a cleric could do, but they were just strength-based. So you could make this very, very strong, you know, like just mountain of a character, and he could still be used to heal. The funny thing was, I don't think the Warlord was actually a leader. If I remember correctly, the Warlord was actually a 4th class called a Controller. And that's something that in 5th edition, they kind of got rid of. They kind of got rid of that idea because it is a very tactical role. The Controller was basically designed to control the battlefield. They could do things like impose difficult terrain. They could move enemies around. They could grant advantage, which in 4th edition was just a +2 to your attack roll. But they weren't there to do a ton of damage. They were there to basically control the battlefield and ensure that their allies could do what they needed to do. And I like controllers. I think they're really, really interesting from a tactical standpoint, and you really don't have them in 5th edition D&D. The closest you get is I can't remember what it's called. One of the fighter callings I talked about in the fighter one, but he's the weapon master, maybe? I don't know. I don't have my PHP, do I? Let me look real quick. I feel dumb because I knew this. Fighter. Opened right up to fighter. Battle Master. That's what it is. So the Battle Master. The Battle Master is as close as you get to a controller in 5th edition. There's a few spells that kind of work that way, but if you want to build a controller, Monk is the other class that both the where the 4 elements and the way the open palm, I think it is, both of those theoretically could be called controller type classes. But again, the monk is not really, you know, the monk has other things it needs to do. So being a dedicated controller is not really what it does. And its ability to control is somewhat limited. So the Warlord, Draconic Calling, was designed to be that controller. The Warlord doesn't do a ton of damage. It's not designed to be a damage powerhouse. It's designed to really exert control over the battlefield, and it has a number of ways to do that. So that's its main thing. Can it do damage? Yes, and any of the Dragon Knight classes can get really, really good at just dishing out massive amounts of damage. I'm not saying that can't happen, but this one is unique in the fact that it's really designed to kind of prevent creatures from being able to damage their allies and really having control over the field itself. Action economy plays a really important aspect in this, much like the monk. So on that note, let's get to the calling itself. So again, at third level, when you pick it, you get your dragon weapon. The dragon weapon for the warlord is what's called the dragon tail. And the dragon tail is very much based on the rope dart or the chain dart from Chinese martial arts, specifically wushu, and it's a really interesting weapon. It takes a high amount of skill to use, and it's basically used by swinging it around and around. And what you do is you'll make it like you'll make the you can't see. You'll make the rope or the chain hit your arm and start bending and swinging the weighted ball or dart on the end, and then you remove that. And what happens is you've basically just changed the angle that it's going at, and whenever you remove your arm, that's the direction that it's going to go out on. So you'll see them kind of flip it around their body and then just shoot it out at a target. And it's a very complicated weapon. It's significantly easier to hurt yourself than it is to hurt your opponent if you don't know what you're doing. But in the rare instance that you have someone that's extremely skilled with it, it can be a very deadly weapon because you have the additional factor of it has a very, very long reach and is relatively unpredictable for your opponent. They can watch you and everything like that, but the changes in direction and the angles from of attack for it can happen so quickly that your opponent really can't predict it too much ahead of time. And then there's also the fact, especially if it's the chain whip or chain dart, you can actually use the chain itself to trap your opponent's weapons or trap your opponent's arms or things like that. So it's a very versatile weapon, very, very confusing. It's not something that generally would have been used in wars. It's more of a show weapon. But this is D&D, so we can make it super, super cool because people have fantastical magical powers. So the Dragon Tail itself, this is actually transformed from either a dagger or a whip. I am a huge believer in the idea that the whip is super underutilized in 5th edition D&D, to the point where I made a dual whip wielding ranger, and he's awesome. I've had an absolute blast playing him, and he actually can do a lot with the reach and everything. So it can be a dagger or a whip because it's a rope dart. And when you transform it, it has the following properties. It does a D8 of damage. Generally with something like this, like both the dagger and the whip are a D4 of damage. I increase the damage, to be blunt, because even their dragon attacks don't do a lot of damage. So having that little bit higher base damage type kind of offsets the fact that unlike the other callings where their dragon attacks do a fair amount of damage, these guys don't. They're control focused, so they won't be doing a crap ton of damage with it. And then it's finesse, reach, and two-handed. And the reach property is one of the things that the class capitalizes in a similar way to how I've seen people with halberds or spears, I think, have reach as well. have used the polearm mastery feat, where they basically use that to, you know, prevent people from being able to attack them in melee range. This kind of has a similar feel to that. So yeah, and then the rest of that is just talking about transforming a dagger or whip into your dragon tail, magical property, blah blah blah. It's the same thing as everything else. I literally just copy paste. This second thing you get at third level is it's called Manipulative Reach, and this is where the Dragon Tail starts to show the very tactical, very control-oriented aspect of it. Starting at third level, you can replace one of your attacks when you take the attack action to attempt to grapple the target with your Dragon Tail. One of the big issues I have with grappling in 5th edition is that to start a grapple, it has to be strength. To break out of a grapple, it's strength athletics to start, but to get out of it can be strength athletics or dexterity acrobatics. And as someone that's actually studied grappling, you do have aspects of grappling that are very much strength-based. If you look at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it is very much a strength-based grappling. If you look at traditional wrestling, that is very much strength-based grappling. If you look at Judo, though, there is an aspect of strength to Judo, but much more of Judo grappling is control and dexterity and using your opponent's weight against them. And then if you look at Aikido, that is entirely small joint manipulation and things like that. And there have been arguments made about, how effective Aikido is in combat simulation and the training that they do. We're not going to get into that. I just don't like the idea that the only way you can grapple someone is by basically overpowering them, because that's not true, and I've never liked that. With this, this lets you use your acrobatics skill instead of your athletics skill, meaning, again, you can be a dex-based grappler. My monk is dex-based and has a strength of 10, and so he can't really grapple anyone because he generally tends to lose those, but he can do all these other cool things. But I like him. I like him to be able to grapple. So that's what this does. So you can grapple a target using your acrobatics instead of athletics, meaning it feeds really well with a dex-based character. And you can grapple up to 10 feet away. Because of the reach of the Dragon Tail, you can grapple a target 10 feet away from you. So what does that mean? Well, basically, if you're up against a melee attacker with a great sword or any melee weapon that doesn't have reach, if you grapple them 10 feet away, they can't actually attack you because their speed becomes 0, but you can still attack them because your weapon has reach. Now, with this particular thing, because you have to basically wrap them up with the Dragon Tail, you can't attack any other target while that one is grappled. So it is very much I'm going to take care of this guy right now while the rest of the party deals with everything else. But it's incredibly effective, especially when we talk about the dragon attack that we'll get to in a second here. So, yeah, they can break out of it just like any other grapple, but again, to break a grapple takes your action, so that is the action economy you're dealing with there. And it's this, they have to beat the same check as before, so you still get to use your acrobatics against their athletics or acrobatics. So there's a good chance they're going to try and break it, and you can still win for a couple of rounds and just keep this guy tied up, wasting his action, not being able to do anything. The other thing you get at third level is your first dragon attack, which is called Tail Slam. The basics of it: you replace one of your attacks when you take the attack action using one Draconic Power Point, and you make a melee weapon attack with your Dragon Tail against it. And it can be up to 10 feet away because, again, you have reach. If you hit them, if the target is large or smaller, you pick it up and you throw it anywhere within range. So you can just move it 5 feet over. You can move it over your head and move it a full 20 feet. And when it lands, the target will be prone. No save or anything, you just knock it prone. If the target is huge or larger, there's huge and gargantuan, you can't throw those, unfortunately. But they do, if you hit, they do get knocked prone, which is very, very useful for your group. Because, again, any melee attacks made against someone who is prone are made with advantage, and any attacks made from the prone position are made with disadvantage. So very useful. Now, the thing about being knocked prone is to get up from being prone, you have to use half your speed to do it. If you are grappled, your speed is 0. That is the only thing the grappled condition does, is it reduces your speed to 0. So what happens is, if you grapple someone and then use Tail Slam on them, they are basically stuck prone until they can break out of the grapple or you release them from the grapple. They can't stand up because their speed is 0. And you can't use, if your speed is 0, you can't stand up. So, again, when you start looking at interactions and things like that, this can be an incredibly useful way to get rid of a very powerful enemy. Because, again, first things first, you can move them into a more advantageous position so that they line up with fireballs or lightning bolts or even burning hands at low levels. So that your kind of party members that have area attacks can hit this guy plus everybody else. The other thing, I think I'd have to look again. I believe if it's well, I've got the damn book here. I can look at all the things. It may just be. I know. Elemental chaos. Beasts. Come on. I'm really well prepared for this if you couldn't tell. I know it's here. There we go. Grapple. Yeah, all it is the creature speed becomes 0. So I just wanted to check that because restrained is a different thing that we'll talk about in a second. So anyway, yeah, this is a... This is a fantastic way to really give your party the upper hand, and they can focus fire somebody down. You can just take somebody out of combat for a little while the rest of your party deals with things. There's a lot of different things that you can do with this Tail Slam grapple combo, and that's really, again, what the class is designed to do. And the only limitation to the class, so it's not like uber powerful, is that when you're grappling a creature, that's all you're doing is you're grappling that creature. You can still make attacks against that creature, but they're the only one you can attack. So anyway, so that's that. At 6th level, we add another thing to really give you more control. In 5th edition, for characters, my understanding, there's only one way a character can restrain an opponent in combat. I think there's a few magic items and stuff like that, but as far as just a random character restraining an opponent, you have to take, I believe it's the Brawler feat. And what it does is if you have a target grappled, which anyone can make a grapple in D&D, it's athletics versus their athletics or acrobatics. So anyone can make a grapple. That's easy enough. But to make someone restrained, you have to have this feat. And what happens is you have to make another check and win it. And then not only are they restrained, but you are restrained as well. The difference between grappled and restrained is grappled, you just have a speed of 0. Restrained, you still have a speed of 0, but all attacks against you are made with advantage. Attacks you make are made with disadvantage, and you have disadvantage on dexterity saving throws. So restrained is an upgraded grapple, and it's something that a lot of monsters can do. Player characters can't. With the Dragon Knight, you can. It works very similar to the Brawl feat, where you have to replace one of your attack actions with another grapple check, basically. But again, you can do it with dexterity instead of strength. And if they fail, then they're restrained. And again, you can do it from 10 feet away, and you are not restrained. With the Brawl feat, both the player character and the target are both restrained, because you're basically holding them down, so you're restrained and they're restrained. With this, only the bad guy is restrained, which is how most monsters have it. So, again, this is a very, very effective thing. At 5th level, you have 2 attacks, so you can just spend 1 turn grappling and then restraining a creature, and your party can focus fire it, your party can ignore it, and you can go on other things, and even if it has ranged attacks, all of its attacks will be made with disadvantage. Again, thus affecting the action economy and things like that. And then while you have it, entangled, you can still attack it, and you get all the benefits of it being restrained without you being restrained. So again, very, very useful, very control oriented. And then the dragon attack you get at 6th level, to be honest, is taken kind of from the monk. Again, I described the fact that the monk, one of its defining features actually comes at 5th level, which is when it gets that stunning strike. Stunning is kind of just a monk thing, but again, because this class is very much inspired by wushu and martial arts and things like that, the weapon itself is a wushu weapon. The dragon attack it has is called Nerve Strike. You can make a melee weapon attack on up to 3 targets in range, so you have to be within 10 feet of 3 targets all at once. This is not one where you can move between attacks. You have to do all 3 at once. On a hit, they take normal damage for a melee attack with your dragon tail, plus 2 dragon dice of damage. So this is one of the more damaging attacks you can do. Still doesn't do a ton of damage, but again, that's not what it's for. And then they have to make a Constitution saving throw, and if they fail, they are stunned until the end of your next turn. So the difference between this and the monk version, you have to be in melee range, where this one you can be up to 10 feet away. You have a reach weapon. And this one can hit 3 targets, whereas the monk one is only against a single target. The big difference being, if you miss with this attack, you waste your draconic power points, whereas the monk doesn't spend the key unless they've already hit. So this actually has two different ways you can fail, which is missing the attack itself or them making the save. So that limits its power a little bit. And again, monks get a key point every level. By the time they're 6th level, they have 6 key points. By the time you are 6th level in the Dragon Knight, I believe you only have 3 key points, or 3 Draconic power points. And those are the same things you use for your Dragon transformation and for your other Dragon attacks. So again, the Dragon Knight is significantly more limited in their resource for doing this, so that kind of balances out, and that's why they can attack multiple targets at the same time. And again, it's not super game breaking, because again, you have to be within 10 feet of 3 different targets. So a smart dungeon master can make it so you can only use this on 1 or 2 targets at a time. And that also means you can't have a target ensnared, because again, to attack targets that aren't your when you have something grappled or restrained, you can only make attacks against that target. So again, it's choices. It's that idea of good design gives you choices to make. Bad design forces you to make this choice because it is the obvious best choice in every situation. And that's what this is designed to be. Is, you can focus on, having a much better chance of taking one person out of combat for a little bit as they're restrained, or taking 3 people out of combat as they are stunned. And again, very much control-oriented, action, economy, all that stuff. The 10th level ability, like I said, is an out-of-combat ability for all of these. And I wanted, again, this was designed with the fact that the character I was kind of building it for was a rogue Dragon Knight hybrid. So that kind of inspired the 10th level ability, which for this one, if you're trained in sleight of hand, you now add double your proficiency modifier when you make sleight of hand checks. And if you're untrained in sleight of hand, you now add your proficiency modifier to your sleight of hand checks. They're really good at sleight of hand, which is used in pickpocketing and stealing and stuff like that. The other thing is your Dragon Tail basically becomes a set of thieves' tools. So you can actually use it to pick a target's pocket or put something in a target's pocket up to 10 feet away. You can also pick a lock or disable a trap up to 10 feet away as well. Your Dragon Tail is your thieves' tool for that. You use your sleight of hand to now pick locks and disable traps, whereas in a regular rogue would just use their thieves' tool, which is still dex based, and if you're proficient in thieves' tool, which all rogues are, you add your proficiency bonus. So this is basically just adding expertise to your sleight of hand and basically letting you use your Dragon Tail as a ranged thieves' tool. So again, another very much control aspect that a lot of people don't think about when they think of control and everything is just the fact that because it's a dex-based character, they could be very sneaky, come up, they could pick some pockets of people, they could plant things on people like explosives or things like that in order to get a better surprise round or something, or they can scout ahead and open locks and disarm traps without having to be right next to it and possibly getting hit by the trap going off poorly. So yeah, again, that idea of control is, even in its non-combat stuff, it's still very much control-oriented. The 14th level ability is, again, designed to be that thing where you really are starting to come into your own as I am really there to help my party do everything I can. When you wield your Dragon Tail, you can now use your bonus action to use the help action against a target within 10 feet. The help action is an action that a lot of people don't realize exists in 5th edition. And basically what it is if you're within 5 feet of a target, you can use the help or the aid action. I believe it's the help action. And what it does is it basically you distract the person that you're attacking, meaning the next person to make an attack against that target gets advantage on that attack. Incredibly useful for rogues because their sneak attack gets really, really deadly if they get crits. Or anyone, anytime you have a monster that's hard to hit, the help action can be incredibly useful. Yeah, this basically means you can be sitting there using your dragon attacks, using your Dragon Tail to actually fight, and the only caveat to that is you can only do this if you are not currently using your Dragon Tail to grapple or restrain an enemy. So if you have that grapple or restrain on, you either have to drop the grapple or restrain to use the bonus action to do aid, or just not have it going to do that, which again opens up a lot of options. Do I want to, if you're not grappling anyone at the beginning of your turn, you can use your bonus action right away to use the help action and then do the grapple restrain, or just grapple and attack, whatever you want to do. Or again, if you have someone restrained but you have multiple guys going, you can go on, drop it. Dropping a grapple is considered a free action. So you could drop that and then, attack and things like that. Or, it gives you a lot of options to, again, help you make your party as powerful as possible. The final ability you get is called Draconic Aid. And this is, to be blunt, this is taken directly from 4th edition Warlord, and I believe the Battlemaster basically has a similar ability, but not quite the same. You get the Allied Strike Dragon Attack. So as part of your attack action, you can use a Draconic Power Point to replace one of your attacks with this Dragon Attack. Choose an ally within 10 feet of you and roll a melee weapon attack for them against an enemy in their melee attack range. If you're transformed, this attack scores a critical hit on an 18, 19, or 20. If it hits, apply the damage as if your ally had made the attack, including any additional damage from features like brutal critical, or sneak attack if they apply, and add an additional dragon die of damage as the same type of damage as your dragon attack. Basically, you can forego one of your own attacks, which again, the Dragon Knight is not designed to be a super damage dealing class. Or the Warlord, is not a super damage dealing class. But the allies of a Warlord probably are. If you can get a Barbarian to make their attack, you're making the attack roll for them. So you're basically using their attack modifiers or anything, but you're making the roll. If you combine this attack with your transformation, they have expanded criticals on that, and Barbarians, when they crit bad. Rogues are the same way. A rogue can only get sneak attack once per turn, not per round. So, and this doesn't use their reaction as well. So this could mean if you have like a Battlemaster and a Warlord in the same party with like a rogue, you could use Allied Strike as one of your actions, and they could get their sneak attack in, and then on the Battle Master's turn, they could use their command to give them another one. They just do crap tons of damage, and they also get the extra damage that you get from, your Dragon Pack, your transformation. Like this is the main damaging aspect of the Warlord, is basically letting someone else take one of your attacks or take both of your attacks. Again, to do this, the way you do it is you literally wrap your dragon tail around the other person's arm and force them to make an attack. So you can't be grappling when you do this, but it kind of speaks for itself. It can be incredibly powerful as long as you understand which of your allies are going to be the best. Do you have a paladin on your team? Let him do that. Let him hit if you can get a crit, which you have a 10% higher chance. You have a 15% chance of rolling a crit when you're transformed on this attack. When paladins crit, not only do they do extra damage, but they can put a smite on there, which doubles that dice too. So you have a paladin on your team, use Allied Strike. You have a barbarian where they get brutal critical and just get tons and tons of damage. Do Allied Strike. You have a rogue, Allied Strike. You have someone with a magic weapon like a flaming scimitar or something like that, or a Frostbrand where they do extra damage, Allied Strike. All these things, whoever does the most damage with a melee attack, do it. Use this for their attack. You sacrifice your own attack, but are able to give them some pretty good stuff. And again, it's that builds into that idea of control. Not only do you control the enemies, now you can kind of control your allies too. Again, with 18th level abilities, they are pretty powerful. So it should be something that is a bit game changing, and that definitely is a game changer. So anyway, that is the Warlord. Like I said, I had a ton of fun making the Dragon Knight. I had a ton of fun designing the Warlord itself and making it a very, very different from the other callings and from any other class currently in 5th edition D&D. It's a very different play style, very tactical. So if you like that idea of very tactical style combat, the Warlord may be the way to go for you. And you still get all the other cool stuff of being a Dragon Knight, like, you can fly and stuff like that. So, and flight adds a whole nother thing because, if you have someone grappled, you can move them at half your speed. Well, if you're flying, you can move them by just dragging them straight up. And I've seen people do this with, like Boots of Flying, where what they'll do is they'll grapple somebody, they'll take them up as high as they possibly can, 60, 70, 80 feet in the air, and then the person basically has the choice of, okay, well, I can break the grapple and fall, possibly to my death, or I can stay grappled and try and attack this person. And with you having them at the end of your dragon tail, yeah, they'll be 10 feet closer to Earth, but they can't attack you. So their only choice at that point is, do I want to fall to my death? So, a lot of interesting things that you can do with this class. Very much change control of the battle away from the bad guys and into your party's favor. That's all my Dragon Knight stuff. That's the end of the Dragon Knight. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I do have one other bit of custom content. I made a divine calling for the monk, divine martial archetype, a divine themed martial archetype. So if you guys want me to do one of these on that, I can. Since I've already covered the monk, I can kind of show how it fits into the monk's ideology. I still haven't done any of the rogue subclasses other than what was in the PHB. So if you guys want me to do There's quite a few subclasses, including I believe, I believe both Xanathars and Sword Coast Adventures Guide both have additional rogue archetypes. So definitely, if you want me to do some more rogue stuff, they're very very different. Rogues, like the Mastermind, is an extremely unique kind of rogue. Or I can start going to other classes in the PHB, or I can if you find a class on the DM's Guild, in the comments below, let me know about it. Tell me what the class name is, and I'll look up the class and do one of these for that as well. So yeah, in the comments below, let me know what are your thoughts on the Warlord. It's not quite as popular as the Dragon Knight itself, but it's still a relatively popular. I believe it's a silver best-selling, which they've added 2 more best-selling now. So my Dragon Knight is still a platinum bestseller, but there's now 2 levels higher. So I'd love to see the Dragon Knight get up there to one of the 2 higher ones. So feel free to share that around. Man, my nose just itches. Let me know in the comments what you think of the Warlord and what you want the next one of these videos to be about. Otherwise, that's all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.